Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And for this last week, well, a little bit of panic is starting to set it on the subreddit, because we got a day with like only 10,000 players active in the game, which is of course pretty damn low. On the actual news development front, we don't have that much. I'm not gonna speculate on exactly what's happening. I'm just part of the people that still play the game every day, but definitely in a pretty casual way. I'm not grinding hours and hours or anything like that. I'm just doing what I enjoy doing, and that is it. I do want to give you guys a quick update on this stuff right here. So let's see, I'll click on the home to show you guys how to get there. So on home you get the faction campaigns that are going on, and we've got the Ottonon Stargate construction where Caldari are making huge progress. They're in fact over halfway to the construction of their gate. And then here is the progress for Galente, 10% in. Not exactly sure how long this stuff will keep going for, but that is the state of the Galente Caldari mission. And here a little bit slower in Amar Minmatar. I think Caldari is by far the most popular race in EVE Online, so it's kind of normal that they come in first. But so Amar is leading here with 7 million out of 25, so about a quarter there or something like that. And then Minmatar is actually at the lowest point with less than 2 million on the 25 million to go, which is also actually kind of normal, considering that Minmatar is usually, if I'm not mistaken, the least popular race in EVE Online when it comes to player numbers, not necessarily with how hardcore those players are. And then for news, I actually think we can go to the New Eden store, because I read that there are new packages for the subscriptions through the New Eden store. So I think if we go to the services, we can find them here a little bit more easily. So you still have the 1 month Omega for 500 plex, but now you also have 3 month Omega for 1200 plex, 6 months for 2100, 12 months for 3600, so 40% off, and then 24 months, 2-year subscription if you want to sink 6600 plex into your account. I could basically do that if I want to, but yeah, we're keeping an eye on how things develop before we pull the trigger on something like that as well. Anyways, let's move on to the market itself. Of course, we are pretty curious as to how things are being impacted here. We start with the pilot services coming in at 245. Like that, and let's get started as always with plex, which as you can see a little bit from the chart, we are trending back up, albeit pretty slowly. And in GDA itself, we're talking 4.7 million for the sellers, 4.4 million for the buyers. That's a pretty narrow margin again. So additional, let's go like this. Here in the Tranquility Trading Tower, we're pretty much used to this by now. They are selling and trading plex as well, but they don't really have an impact on the minimum and maximum prices. It's happening in both GDA itself and the Tranquility Trading Tower, just to jump out. That's a player-owned structure. So overall 4.7 million to 4.4 million, a little bit above that, is what the price of plex is at the moment, which is of course still very, very expensive, especially on this 1-year chart. But we all know by now why this is. Real life costs for EVE Online have gone up, which is undoubtedly a big part as to why we're seeing fewer active players as well. Next up, we have the multiple pallet train certificate. That's actually doing a little bit of a reversal here. So you can see we held on to a high plateau for about 10 days. And now you can see that the 5-day moving average and the daily average has gone below 20-day moving average. So a little bit of a trend break after reaching, I think, around 1.8 billion for the average price. Maybe buyers are starting to drop out of this mark a little bit. Still 1.85 billion pretty much for the sellers, but 1.68, so below 1.7 billion ISK for the buyers. What's the difference on that one? Almost 200,000, so definitely closer to a 10% margin between sellers and buyers than for plex. And I think here it's basically buyers. You can see that here as well from the minimum prices that are starting to lower the prices a little bit. Eventually, high prices are the solution to high prices. When demand drops off, then price has to go lower as well. Not necessarily a healthy situation from an economic growth standpoint, of course. For the skill extractors, let's take a look at that one. Much more in line with Plex, of course, where we got a peak up to 700 million ISK for a single extractor. We're moving back down to a little bit above 500 million, but you can see at the tail end here as well that an inflection point is in the works again to restart, I think, an upwards momentum. 535 million for the sellers, 523 million for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin, pretty low volumes as well, up to 10, 15, something like that for the sellers and the buyers. So we are clearly trending down in volumes as well. We're picking back up a little bit here as we get to that inflection point. Impact on the injectors. Here are the large scale injectors that are plateauing with that same potential problem, as we can clearly see the minimum prices starting to go a little bit lower, daily averages as well, and 5-day moving average flattening out. So large scale injectors are going for almost 900 million. There's a couple of sellers coming in just below that price point, and again an 840 million for the buyers, which is way less than 10% between sellers and buyers. So here we still have a market that's actively being used, being traded. Not exactly sure where this is coming from. I'm personally suspecting that it's Nullsec, that's or not just Nullsec, but mainly Nullsec, that is trying to adapt to the new environment, and might be some alpha players as well that are currently alpha but were omega before, that are maybe like organizing some tunes and things like that. But in general, the worrying bit, you could say, for those that are looking for those crazy high prices is of course that those minimum prices, that spread is starting to increase, and that is generally a sign that it's the buyers that are basically, they just are not willing to pay these prices anymore. Small scale injectors, all right, we haven't seen that in a while, but a very uniform chart here with a plateau for about a week at pretty much the 1 year high point, close to 190 million. I don't think we got there yet, but definitely above the 185. And we are now at 184.5, so almost 185 million for the sellers and 175 million for the buyers. So just a 10 million margin again here, about 5% between sellers and buyers, showing that there is definitely interest in trading in the small scale injectors. It could be that there are some people that want to take their profits. If we look at this chart, definitely a good time, and enough people that are basically interested in Plex skill injectors to get their tunes up and running to do whatever it is they want to do in EVE Online. Multiple pilot trading certificates though, really showing a different story. Final injector is of course the daily alpha injector, and if you're looking at for this one as an activity gauge, not just for the game but also for the alpha players, this is not looking too good. Of course, we are actually dropping off substantially below the high plateau that we managed to maintain for almost a month, well above the 62.5 million mark. We're now at 62.8, 63 million, let's say, for the first few sellers. They're dropping off pretty sharply, and 56 million for the buyers. 56, 62, let's see, we need to get a 6 million. Yeah, again, over 10% actually, 63 to 56, 10% margin, with basically buyers saying that's just not doable anymore. So on the one hand, the good news is that these daily alpha injectors become a little bit more affordable. Going back below the 60 million mark on average, I think you will be able to grab a daily alpha injector for that price, but it also does signal a capitulation in demand, I think, considering these minimum prices are taking a pretty sharp dive. And then finally, we've got the hypercores that are still following Plex quite sharply, with the spike up to 600,000 here. A pullback after the Plex sale ended, where you could basically just grab Plex in game and then use 300 of them, I think it was, for a month subscription. That was over, so we got a little bit of breathing room here, but the upward trend, the inflationary trend, is right back. 515, 520,000, even 525,000 very quickly for those hypercore sellers. And then another, again, difference between daily alpha injectors and the trading certificates and the other services. 475,000 for the first buyer. Really narrow margin again, showing that there is a little bit more interest for the hypercores still. I guess gamblers might just be the last ones to leave the game if something like that were to happen. But yeah, they do, of course, you know, hypercore, hypernet. It's basically the perfect gambling system in the sense that you are gambling, but with odds that are perfect, right? If there's 100 tickets, you buy one of them, you get a 1% chance to win, and there is no extra odds for the bank or anything like that. And that might just be pretty attractive to those that need to have that gambling itch scratched in EVE Online. So yeah, there's definitely interest for the hypercores, plex, and the injectors extractors. Next up, we have the mineral market coming in at 1020. There we go, and as always we'll start with titanium. Not really good news for those that, like myself actually, that were hoping that we could get above 4 ISK and stay above 4 ISK for titanium. Although we don't lose a lot of ground, we are closing the gap just below 4 ISK at, let's see, in GDA itself, 393 for the sellers and 380 for the buyers, so still a pretty damn narrow margin here as well. Of course, 2 billion units coming in at 401 are basically sealing the deal and keeping us from really going above 4 ISK. As basically a normal price for titanium, we're still just below that. That is unfortunate because I actually spend a little bit of time mining, relaxed mining in my Orca as well over the last week. Not a lot, but definitely a little bit. And price above 4 ISK for titanium, we hadn't seen that in a while, so that felt pretty good. Next up here we get pyrite, which last week was losing ground, basically went above 10 ISK, lost that range as well, and is now starting to move sideways again. So I think we have to accept that a 8-9 ISK margin is going to become a normal price for pyrite, and above 10 ISK is actually a great price, a sell opportunity. We're at 918, so 920 for the sellers. And then the bad news, 740 for the buyers. That's definitely a pretty big gap here percentage wise, showing that if there's one high-sec mineral that's struggling at the moment, it might be oversupplied, there might not be enough demand, it is clearly the pyrite market. And then I've actually been focusing on Mexalon sources, and this one is actually doing a little bit better. If you look at this chart, we're still able to maintain a price of 75 and up, 79 for the sellers and above 70 for the buyers as well, showing that difference again for titanium and Mexalon. There is the stronger demand, a narrower margin, and thus we get a better price that's a little bit more easy to defend. Unfortunately for titanium, it looks like it's 390 rather than 4 ISK, but overall these are of course the high-sec minerals to focus on. And then pyrite is struggling in that mix. For low sec, here is isogen. We're probably still stuck below 400. Yeah, we saw that last week. There was a pretty sizable order that was going to keep us from doing anything, which is right here, the 78 million units at 394. That's really gonna keep us from breaching 400 and maybe trying to get to a 420 or something like that before we get some sizable volumes. But we got good supplies and they are coming in at 390. Buyers at 376. That's a super narrow margin, so it is possible, there is demand, but unfortunately, and here's another 150 million at 390 as well, and there's still some players out there that are holding their that have been holding their isogen this whole time and that are now deciding to unload even below the 400 ISK price mark. And so we actually have basically the consensus price for now is still 400 ISK, and I think we should just be sort of surprised. Maybe I'm personally a little bit surprised at how long this is taking, because this to me is just a sign that there's still people that indeed have hundreds of millions, if not billions of units of isogen that are ready to be brought to the market at these better prices, and 400 ISK is just too juicy a target. So there's that continuous dumping of those bigger volumes that is keeping us well in check in isogen. I still think we could go higher if those would be depleted. Then we get Noxium, and that is clearly seeing a little bit of an inflection point when below 750 ISK, and you can see here a little bit of a wavy pattern, but 20-day moving average is starting to take off. We are at 890 now for the sellers and 845 for the buyers, so pretty narrow margin. Another sign that there might be a little bit more demand in the system, something perhaps happening in Nullsec as well with some construction needs, or maybe the race that's happening, of course. If we go home again and we go to the faction campaigns, that these are costing material to the faction warfare players and the players that are getting involved, and that they need a little bit of means to replace those, and perhaps as well they want to be ready for what comes next, which might include some larger ships like carriers. I do know still that my BPCs, especially for the freighters, are selling super quickly at extremely high prices, so there is definitely construction happening in the game. Next, we've got Nullsec, which is with Zydrine, that is doing another 1 year high point, well above 2000 ISK, 2366 ISK, so almost 2.4 for Zydrine, very close I think to historical high points here. And buyers, well, they have no choice, 2154, so still a very narrow margin, about 200 ISK, less than 10% of the sell price, despite the fact that we're at a 1 year high point. That is very unusual, showing that we're not going to be rid of these high prices very quickly unless something drastic happens. We are not going to see, like with the multiple pipe drain certificates, those minimum prices just drop off all of a sudden. Here it's gonna be a supply side thing. The only way I think to bring these prices down is for more Zydrine to find its way to the market. And Megasite is doing something similar, actually similar, a little bit more steady and within a more reasonable range, you could say. If you think above 2000 ISK for a single piece of mineral is a lot. Then we were above the 1500 mark, but you can see here a pretty sharp increase in price all of a sudden. 1820 for the sellers, 1760 for the buyers, so another 1 year high point for a Nullsec mineral, with buyers forced up as well. They have no choice, and this is a supply side problem, I think, for Megasite and Zydrine. And then finally we've got Morphite, that's also edging up, which is again not a good sign when it comes to supplies coming from Nullsec here. Morphite at the highest point in probably 6 to 7 months here, at 47,000 almost for the sellers, 45,000 for the buyers. Where this could be good news is, for me personally of course, this could be a sign that the mining bonanza in Nullsec might just be over, and if this also translates into advanced movements, it will also translate into Tech 2 ships, and I have of course bought some Tech 2 ships at, I think, pretty low prices. But first we've got PI, and that's coming in at 1750. There we go. On this one, let's take a look. Broadcast nodes continuing to build, very, very surprising, because right, it doesn't show that much on the chart. This July, August at around 1.5 million actually felt like a strong summer where we held on to a pretty good price. And here is fall, and we're actually going up even more in price. 1.9 million for the sellers, 1.8 million for the buyers, almost matching the 1 year high point from just about a year ago. This is quite unusual, but for me this is another sign that there is production happening in large ships, because that's where a lot of this PI is now going towards. Then we've got our construction blocks that are, well, losing a little bit of ground. So first sign that here we're not doing that well, but still sellers are at 9,700 ISK, 10,000 is still visible on the front page, and 9,280 for these buyers is still a pretty narrow margin. So while we've lost a little bit from the top, we're still at the highest range for the entire year. And then we've got coolants next that are holding strong, although those minimum prices, right, you do get some demand side jitters, I think, here and there. For coolants, we are still average prices are still super high, 11,750 to almost 11,000 disk. That's super high for a refined PI material, especially for something like coolants. So easy to make. Gas planets are everywhere. You can make them very easily in very large volumes. Even for players that just want to get started with PI coolants, one of the easiest stuff to make quickly, to get a lot of in a short amount of time. So for this to still go at these high prices, and then also on the ticker, if you keep an eye on it a little bit longer, for fuel prices to continue to go down is definitely pretty strange. Then we've got enriched uranium, and 1 year high point, a sharp increase in price. All of a sudden we are talking 15,500 for the sellers, 14,400 for the buyers. Had to follow suit on this as well, and that could be a little bit different from what we're seeing in coolants, right? We're seeing some jitters here on the demand side. For enriched uranium, this entirely feels like a supply side problem. All of a sudden we're just running out of the stuff, prices shoot up to crazy prices. This might be reminiscent if you like live in Europe or something, or you follow that type of news for what happens with gas. This to me really feels like we ran out. You can also see I can't browse on the supply side of things anymore. So enriched uranium is a big problem, and the difference is that it's a lot harder to make enriched uranium. If you want to make that on a single planet, I think there's like plasma planets and maybe another magma planets or something like that, but those are a lot harder to find than, for instance, the gas planets. And so this is definitely interesting. While before, up until September, I would say I constantly had the feeling like, all right, most of the PI market is doing the same thing. We get strong demand, we get enough supply, but we are clearly having pretty high prices. This is the first time where I would say coolants and enriched uranium are doing something different. Coolants is holding well, but also has sometimes a couple of demand dips, and then enriched uranium is actually looking like we don't have enough. So that's interesting. Not good news, of course, for those that are looking for cheaper PI. Integrity response drones losing a little bit over the last week, but once we go below 2.5 million, it looks like buyers are coming back in, pushing us very quickly back above that. 2.65 to 2.4 million, still very expensive on the 1 year chart, of course. Mechanical parts still well above 10,000 as well, 11,160 to 10,400. Our miniature electronics, let's see what these are going for, almost 13,000, above 11,000 as well for those buyers. So even though we are at this very high range, we've got a normal margin of around 1,000 disks between sellers and buyers. Nano factories, all right, not that great, not like a high point or anything like that, but still above 900,000 for the sellers and below 800,000 for the buyers. So again, maybe here and there some demand jitters could start to show up in the market. And then organic mortar applicators, maybe a little bit of a combination of the two, because a late bloomer in September going from 700,000 to 900,000, but is there enough demand to maintain a price like that? Does look like it. Look at the sharp drop off in the minimum prices as we are back to 880 to 770,000 for the buyers, which is all the way down here. So there is clearly something moving in the PI market, in my opinion. Recursive computing modules, pretty stable actually, then 850 to 813. So we get everything happening all over the place. We get price spikes, we get minimum prices dropping off, and then here we get super narrow margins at a pretty average price as well. Robotics, all right, that is clearly showing that something is happening, because I thought we would be able to stay below 75k for a while once we broke that, but no, here we are. Buyers are apparently coming in, not even needing that much in volumes, and willing to quickly push robotics back to 77,000 for the sellers and 76,240 for the buyers. So here all of a sudden demand found its need, or found its second breath, and pushed us right back into that best range for the year yet again. Then we get our rocket fuels that are holding at 11k, almost 12 in fact for the sellers, 11 for the buyers, so doing quite well. Self-harmonizing power cores working on pretty much another 1 year high point, not on the daily average, but the 5-day moving average is getting there. 2.3 million and well above 2 million for those buyers as well. Smart fab units 70k, 1 year high range as well, not point, but the range is clearly the best we've seen all year. Sterile conduits making its way, staying well above a million as well, 1.2. And look at that, those buyers also 117. So super narrow margin here. Whatever gets produced does find buyers pretty quickly. Supercomputers above 75k, I'd still say that's quite all right. Our synthetic oils at 8000 ISK, and then the synthetic synapses. Someone mentioned that this is also needed for one of the newer products for the new faction ships. So this is not just related to implants, but yeah, 1 year high point, 120,000 for the sellers, 106 for the buyers for synthetic synapses because of the introduction of the new faction ships as well. Thank you very much for that comment, by the way. Super interesting information, of course. Transcranial microcontrollers, probably tied a little bit more to the implants, stuck at 100,000, so still very, very expensive in my opinion, 106 to 97,000. Clearly again trading at the highest range. And then we get our one exception that's been like struggling a lot, and look at what's happening. So we were still 5,000, just a little bit below, just a little bit above, mostly below. So not doing too well for refined PI material, considering the 11, 12k for some of the others. This was terrible, but look at what happens here. All of a sudden those max prices are starting to shoot up. So even water-cooled CPU is starting to make a move, and it looks to me like this could be a supply side problem, going up to 7,500 ISK. Buyers, well, they're at 4, so I think they're starting to feel that something is changing even in the water-cooled CPU market. But yeah, high range once again, although it's quite relative, of course, here in the water-cooled CPU. But this does start to feel like something is happening. Some problems are starting to show up, and it's not just demand here, not just strong demand that is pushing prices up, because, well, suppliers are just doing their thing, not able to quickly, you can't just quickly ramp up your PI production, but it does start to feel like maybe the low player numbers are starting to cut into supply as well, which will cause problems, of course, if that keeps up. And then we get to it where mainframes that went to a 1 year high point just last week lose a little bit of ground from that, but at 1.8 to 1.6 million, I think that's still very, very reasonable. So yeah, PI, I didn't think it would be that interesting. I thought we would just coast along in the general trends, and I'm especially surprised. I wanted to go here. Surprised by the very quick recovery from robotics. I did not see that coming, but this to me is starting to show some real problems. Not just that there is high demand, but that here and there we are having supply issues as well. I could be completely wrong on that, but that is my read on what's happening here. And then we get to the advanced moon materials, 2645. Where I'm of course hoping for a bottom to start to show up, but I could be wrong on that as well, of course. So let's get started. Here is crystalline carbonite for Galente production, and that is clearly not a sign of a bottom or a market that wants to go higher, like the Nosec minerals, for instance, and more fight. Nope, below 95 for the sellers, 94 for the buyers. So we do have a narrow margin, but at a super low range. For Caldari, it is titanium carbide right here, which took a big dive last week. We saw that touched on the disc on the minimum price a couple of times. Few more buyers coming in, so we're back at 120 to 110, but it is clearly still very cheap and not like a full recovery or anything like that. That would show that we are forming a bottom. Then for Minmatar, it's Fernite carbide that's continuing a slow downtrend away from the disc, 96 to 95.5, so very narrow margin. There's definitely some trading happening at the cutting edge here, but it's that cutting edge is super low in price range. And then for Amar, it's tungsten carbide that's heading back for the disc as well, 106 to 103. So definitely not seeing that in the carbides just yet. Let's see what the metamaterials are doing. For Galente, it's photonic metamaterials. Yeah, slow uptrend. At least we are above the 20-day moving average, but we have to be honest, we are just basically recovering from yet again a 1 year low point, and even a massive volume is not really having much of an impact on the market anymore. 6,600 to 6,300 for Caldari, non-linear metamaterials. basically reaching another 1 year low point, 11k to 9.5 for the buyers. And with these ranges, buyers are picking up non-linear metamaterials below 10,000 ISK. Then we've got Minmatar, which is Plasmonic right here. Also clearly pressure is back, not yet reaching 10k, but not doing well. And then Amar, it's terahertz metamaterials that are staying below 10,000 ISK, 9.5 to 9.3, despite not seeing a lot of supplies. Prices are not moving, so not what I expected, not what I was personally hoping for, but here is the reality. If we go through the other advanced materials, I think we'll see the general trend continue. From ionic condensates, you can see how that is moving away from that 3750 range, so still under pressure, despite the fact that we're basically at the lowest prices maybe ever, definitely of the year. Then we've got ferrogel, right, 1 year low point, bit of recovery, we're not going anywhere in price. Fullerenes, same story, got back above 500 ISK for a couple of days, and now the slowdown trend is right back. Hypersynaptic fibers makes its way back to 5,000 ISK, but all this is basically a bit of a recovery from that 1 year low point, so I think it'll be over soon. Nanotransistors, right, again we go below 2.5, we bump up to almost 3,000, don't make it, and then we land on 2.5 pretty much. Phenolic composites, 1 year low point, and we start to move sideways again. So it's pressurized oxidizer under pressure. I mean, I can go through the list, but don't expect too much. Reinforced carbon fibers might look a little bit better, right? There's definitely a small trade that you could have made below 7.5, sell at 10,000 ISK, but look at the volumes, very hard to do. And the bad news, if you're looking for those higher prices, 5-day moving average and daily average starting to cross the 20, so we could be back on a downward spiral. Ceramic fibers, that one did nice little recovery to 300 ISK, which is definitely not great, but bottom at 200, back at 300. We'll see how long it lasts. So yeah, in general, advanced move materials, to me, not showing any real signs that bottoms are being formed or that there's supply side problems, where we do see that in some of those null-sec minerals. I'm not seeing it in advanced move materials, so that means that we should have bad news for Tech 2 ships if, like me, you're looking for those higher prices. 3110 for those, like that. And so the trend has been that while we are making new lows, the biggest problem is that all volatility is apparently, in my opinion, leaving the market. We're seeing lower and lower higher points on like a monthly, bi-monthly basis or something like that, which makes trading almost impossible. So I am basically fully back into, I'll just try to snag some of those 1 year low points and then hope for a better price way down the line. So medium to long term is what I'm looking at for the Tech 2 market. So the Basilisk is just edging its way back to 130 million. You see that those minimum prices drop off below 100 million from time to time. 127 to 114, definitely not too great. Cerberus made its way back above 150 and then lands right back. So not a super nice to show, but you can see here we went well above 150. Let's see if I can maybe show that. We went to 180 and here now made it to 150, only just on the daily, made it to 150 on the 5-day moving average, but we are really not going anywhere. Curse really showing that pattern that I was talking about, so at the moment stuck around the 130 million mark. And so if you look at this trend for those high points, 200 million, well above 150, almost reaching 180, just above 150, just above 150, and here only the daily makes it, 5-day moving average stuck below that. And now if you want to call this a bit of a recovery, it's really terrible for selling. Damnation slowly landing on that low range of around 250 million. Then we get our Deacon, even those logistics frigates. I mean, it had this one nice little trade, right? Buy 15, 16 million, something like that. Sell for probably 25 or something like that was very doable. But immediately after that, the biggest problem is that any such opportunities are so oversold like crazy that we then dive to a new range that's even lower. And this little spike that's happening at the moment for the Omen means above 17 million and then 10 million for the buyers. It's just really nothing to write home about, and this will probably get squashed very quickly again. Then here we get the Eagle doing a little bit better. Although volatility, not able to reach 200 million again. This is obviously like nullsec related, because you do have the Eagle as being part of doctrines for many large groups. So big buying happening here when we were stable at a super low price range for quite a bit, pushing the price up to 170 for the sellers, 135 for the buyers. I do have 1 or 2 cheap Eagles myself. Actually, I have to drink here for a moment. There we go. So Eagle could be considered a tradable one. Let's see what his average price was. Yeah, 120. Selling now for 170. You probably had an opportunity 180 or something like that at the very best moment. So a small trade opportunity, but we'll see by next week. I personally expect this to then be pretty flat very quickly and might get oversold, although this is a sizable amount of volume, so maybe that can stay in check. Next here we get the EOS, also doing a little bit of a nice bump up, but again, right, look at those high prices, those high points just continuing to go down. So it's nothing too major. We ran out of ships, 288 to 238. Yeah, not much to say. Trade volumes are down as well. Basically, it's going to be next to impossible to sell at this price, and I think competition will come in very quickly again. We'll see next week if I'm right on that. The area is also a slight uptick, all right. Does start to feel like there's a lot of them that are maybe trying to bottom out. We'll see what happens. The Aries again running out of ships, 41 million to 36 million. Then we've got the Flycatcher next, all right, away from the bottom, but that pressure is clearly here. 5-day back below 20-day moving average, not a place to trade. Guardian's heading back for 100 million. That could be interesting. 107 to 101. We're on the right side of the chart right here. You can see those minimum prices still below the 5-day moving average. If you want to grab a Guardian just above 100 million ISK, this is the time to do so. And that's probably the lowest price we've seen in quite a bit. So the Guardian could be in buy territory. The Heretic, are those buyers below 30, 31 to 36, quite a bit of supply. So I think we could go lower on this one. The Hound, all right, I'll be honest, I did not expect that, especially looking at advanced spoon materials, but sell opportunity for the Hound. Just a couple of days of volumes has pushed the price up to 27 for the sellers, and we're still at 18 for the buyers. So those buyers are at the moment like, you know, we get a little bit of time. You sellers will get impatient again and will crash this, but this is the first time that we basically do have a bit of a trend break. And what I was of course expecting was that if it would happen, it would be in small ships first. So here is another frigate class Tech 2 ship. If you bought at the low points, you now have a nice sell opportunity with pretty decent profits. I would say for the Hound, you could have bought at 15 million pretty easily, selling at 27. Definitely a tradable spike all of a sudden for the Hound. The spread is huge though, so it's not gonna be easy, but there it is, and I'm a bit surprised by that. Next up, we've got the Ikitursa. Made its way back above 500 million ISK. It was of course reaching a ridiculously low price point for quite a bit, 550 to 508. And then our Ishtar, all right, finally something that I would have probably expected to happen a little bit sooner. We got a big volume spike, so a big chunk of buying happened, but quite carefully so. 146 million to 118. Maybe if you bought below 130, you can see that as like a small sell opportunity, but the percentages are of course not as good as the Hound. Here's the Kirin, slight uptick in price here as well at the tail end, 15 million to 12 million, so a little bit too late to buy basically. Manticore stuck in that 15 to 20 million range. 19 to 17, so that's not great. Nemesis made its way back above 15, ever so slowly, so not much action here. Nighthawk, another one that now breaks below 250. Sellers are at 257, buyers are at 230, and again, look at those daily averages and those minimum prices. You want to buy a Nighthawk below 250 million. I bought mine above 250, but this is your second opportunity to buy really low. Then we get the Oneros. Yeah, look for an Oneros below 100 million, so that's a no. Then we get the Purifier. All right, made its way back to 20. You could have bought below 15 on a couple of occasions. 21 almost for the sellers, 18 for the buyers. Yeah, look at the volumes as well. Those are going up. Where is that coming from? Is it speculation, or is there a need for these Tech 2 ships somewhere? Maybe again the faction races, faction campaigns, or perhaps in Nullsec something might be brewing there as well. Rook 150, slight uptick, nothing too major. Saber still definitely pretty low and struggling. Scalpel, all right, another frigate. Look at that, buy close to 10 million, sell for 18 million, something like that. Should be easily doable. Pretty nice. Don't know where it's coming from, I'll be honest, but this is slightly the most alive I've seen basically the Tech 2 market in weeks. So the Scimitar not so much, but a couple of frigates are doing really well. Sleipnir stuck, Vagabond stuck, and Zarmast back above 400. Making it a little bit less cheap. But this is not what I expected, to be honest, especially here. The Hound price shock is quite impressive. And then a couple of these other frigates are doing decently good spikes. The real question is, of course, where will we be by next week? Will all of these be completely crushed by new supply? Then, of course, new bottoms may be in, and it's the right time to still just hold off and try to buy the cheapest chips. But if that can't happen, and if maybe we just need a little bit more time for advanced movements to form a bottom, then maybe volatility could be on the way back for Tech 2 ships, because this is potentially something that could start to happen. So we'll have to keep a close eye on it. Definitely interesting. I did not expect a nice combination. I think we got like 3-4 sell opportunities, and definitely seeing a couple of buy opportunities as well in the Tech 2 ship market. Next we've got the Tech 3 ship market, 41 minutes. There we go, and that should not be too great, I think. So here is the Confessor, slow and steady, slightly moving down, 47 million to 43 million. Volumes are absolutely terrible. Hecate also slowly edging down, trying to get below 50. 50 for the sellers, 47 for the buyers. And then the Jackdaw, same story. Minimum prices actually closing the gap already as we broke 50 million, 49 to 47. And then finally the Zwepel, stuck at the range just below 50 million. So my take on this is that below 50 million, there's like a little bit more interest in these tactical destroyers. There the value proposition is probably slightly better, but there's also no real supplies to crush through those types of prices because of, in all likeliness, the production cost. And we'll take a look at that in a moment. Considering the extra faction ships that have come out, I would say I'm expecting lower gas prices on just more supply, but nothing too drastic, but just perhaps like slightly below average or something like that. For the cruisers, it's a little bit more interesting. You can really see down here, you could have bought a Legion below 160, slight bump, not that great, but almost 180, 20 million. There's something I think to be said for trying to do a trade on that one. Then we get the Loki, that's back pretty low, 183 to 172. So you're buying a Loki below 175. For the Proteus, that was a little bit too stable, and the low point is close to 150, so I wouldn't make a move on that one just yet. And then we've got the Tengu though, look at that, very pronounced buy opportunity, well below 160, close to 150 in fact on a single day here would have been possible. And we are back up to 180, 160, 180, another 20 million trade right here. If you want to do trading in Tech 3 ships, I think the Tech 3 cruiser hulls are way better than the tactical destroyers, and it used to be the exact reverse. So pretty interesting stuff, and definitely a small sell opportunity right now in the Tengu if you bought just about 10 days ago, which was definitely possible. So interesting stuff in general, but let's take a look at gas next. So that's going gonna be manufacturing and research, materials, gas cloud materials. So let's go straight to the raw stuff, 43.35. And see what's happening here. People ask me to take a look at these more often, but I do want to, have the extra material be all over the place, basically. Let's start with the fullerenes. Here is the C28 chart. Definitely trying to get back to 10K here, which would be the average for the year. 11,000 to 10,700. So a little bit expensive, but under pressure. Ooh, C32 though, reaching a 1-year high point at 25K. And then our 320 is basically a little bit below average, where I would expect things to be. Same story with the C50 at around 5,000 disk, a little bit up for the month, but on the 1-year chart this still feels doable. 540 though, close to 1-year high point. C60, yeah, slightly expensive, but stable. C70, slightly expensive, decently stable, a little bit below average, what you would expect, or below the start of the year, you could say. So that's doable. And then C84, 10K, definitely expensive. So for the full range, I don't think these are involved in, like I said, tactical destroyers and the faction ships, but we got a little bit of a mixed picture, a couple of high points, a couple of above average and a couple below average. So that's clearly not going to show a trend. Let's see the booster gas cloud. So here we always have the Cito and the Miko, and that's a little bit more what I expected. Amber, Cito, Saracen, definitely below average, in fact trading at the lowest range below 50K. 52 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. Feels really cheap, or relatively cheap on this 1-year chart. Amber Miko though, pretty expensive, close to the high range above 75K. Azure Cito, 50K as well, so clearly a little bit of a bump in the road if you're looking for the cheapest price. And then Azure Miko, basically trading at that 50K range as well, pretty stable but expensive. Celadon Cito, man, that's volatile. 80K probably up here, and currently selling for 59K, buyers at 38K, so that's gone down substantially. And then Caledon Miko, stuck at an expensive range, I would say. Golden Cito, inexpensive. And then our Golden Miko, just coming from almost a 1-year high point of 100,000 disk and losing a little bit of ground from that, but still expensive. Lime Cito, below average. And then Lime Miko, yeah, expensive range, a little bit above average. Cito for Malachite, downward trend, although a nice spike right here probably. Let's see, late August, maybe the announcement of the faction ships could have done that, I'm not really sure. And then Malachite Miko, yeah, I'd say slightly expensive on the 1-year chart, but not by too much. It's really difficult to, there's no clear trends, because here we get a Cito that's got a spike in May and basically only just recovered from that. And Vermilion Miko, the Miko Saracen is definitely still above average on most of them. And then the Viridian Cito is inexpensive, and then the Viridian Miko here is above average, but a little bit down on the 20-day moving average. So it's very difficult. I'm just going to go through the Mikos here, focusing on that 20-day moving average a little bit. Yeah, maybe slightly down, but not by much. Slightly down, but not by much. Here, pretty volatile. Definitely the high range. Expensive at the high range. And expensive 1-year high points. Very difficult to really give you guys any clear trends in these booster gas clouds. I would say that Cito is quite often affordable and doable, but Miko is still all over the place and pretty expensive. Let's take a look at the compressed ones then, just to get a feel of these, but this might be pretty bad. Yeah, volumes are terrible, and so compressed Amber Cito down in price. Compressed Amber Miko, pretty expensive, and then we get some bad charts, and it's not gonna yield us very much, I think, unfortunately. And then we get the Fullerites in here as well. Expensive, average. Yeah, it's honestly, I think unfortunately that the compressed market for gas clouds is not mature enough to really give us the information that we want. And I thought we would see a little bit more of a general trend, but I can't really make that one out, except maybe that the pseudocerosine does feel pretty low and in ample supply. But overall we get quite a few different trends happening throughout these gas cloud markets. I would say it's probably still a good place to try and get some activity if that's what you're looking for, maybe an alternative, a bit more of a risky alternative to the regular mining activities for ores. But I thought we would see something that could maybe give us predictability on what would happen for faction ships and the tactical destroyers, but that's not happening. So I would say that there's also demand side things happening for those tactical destroyers, for instance, that are keeping these prices in check and slowly down at the moment. All right, that's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.